With the 2025 NHL Draft Lottery over, we now know exactly where the Montreal Canadiens are going to be selecting and with each of their picks. And today I want to go through what players the Montreal Canadiens might be targeting, not just with their 16th and 17th overall picks, but even their second rounders. As of right now, Montreal has 4 picks inside the top 2 rounds, so we're going to be talking about each one, talking about which targets might make sense. So make sure you watch till the end for all the draft talk and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this, presented by BetUS TV. Now, it's very rare for a team to have back-to-back picks inside the first round, and I think that's what makes Montreal's draft so interesting, having both 16th and 17th overall. Now, I think we do have to talk about the chances of the Montreal Canadiens trading one of or even both of these picks, because it is a possibility. Really, when we look at the Montreal Canadiens rebuild, at least when it comes to their draft picks, if they were to draft nobody else, I think it would be pretty complete, at least when it comes to the core itself. We just had Ivan Demidov come into the fold this year, and you're going to have David Reinbacher as well come in next year, on top of players potentially like Owen Beck as well, so a lot is going to be filled out here pretty soon. And they, for a while, of course, have been one of the top draftees in the NHL. So many different drafts with so many different picks, and a lot of them have worked out pretty well. So to see this Montreal team trade one of those first rounders for maybe a second line center or potentially some defensive help, it would not surprise me in the least. I think most likely it would end up being that 16th overall pick, just because I think for teams they'd have more value skipping ahead of Montreal than rather being behind them. But at the same time, either one of them could get dealt, and if they want to go crazy, get a big time player, both could work as well. There's even the possibility that if they go crazy, they trade both of their first round picks, and maybe they package both of their seconds and another player or prospect for a first round pick if they're really feeling somebody in the draft. So there's options here for Montreal, and because of how many picks and players they've stockpiled, they're going to give themselves the options on draft day, which is really exciting. But for the purpose of today's video, let's just assume that Montreal keeps both of those picks in the first round, keeps both of their picks in the second. What positions could they potentially target? Which players make the most sense for each pick? And who do I think the Montreal Canadiens could end up going for? Now, before we get into the specific players, I wanted to talk about the team needs and when it comes to this year's draft for Montreal, the positions that I could see them wanting to fill when it's all said and done. Of course, 5 team needs, you're not going to fill all of those in 4 picks, but I think you could get a pretty good mix going here. And there's a couple of spots here that I think are going to be pretty easy to fill in all honesty. In terms of the biggest need, I think for this Montreal team, especially if they're going to keep both of those picks, is a middle 6 wing. And they'll have wingers coming into the fold. They still have a couple that aren't on the team yet, but most of the big time wings that they've drafted have already come onto the roster. And I think especially that 16th overall pick, as we've had in mock drafts before, I think that could be a position where Montreal goes out ahead and really gets something there. Especially I'm looking at the left wing side. That could be a bit of a hole going forward that I think Montreal might want to shore up. But honestly, on both sides of the rink, I think there is opportunities for the Habs to especially fill that third line wing spot, whether it's on the left side or the right. I just think there's a lot of opportunity there for somebody to come in, really bring some good strength, some good skill. And especially for Montreal, I think they're going to want to get a mature type of wing to fill that type of role. The second need I would say for Montreal is a middle/bottom pair right shot defenseman. And of course, you got Lane Hutson already as the top right D. You're going to have David Reinbacher as well, filling in those sturdy, dependable minutes. And I think as well, Montreal could potentially go for a right shot defenseman that's a little more offensive, maybe, bring some good puck carrying abilities, but is a solid two-way player. Similar, I would say, to a David Reinbacher, or potentially if they could find the right fit, maybe go for a pure shutdown, big 6'5" type of defenseman. There's not many that are right shot in this year's class, but Montreal could get creative, maybe just trading for one with the picks they have. I think also getting somebody that is potentially a power play sniper for them could be very interesting. They got a lot of playmakers on the team right now, but this is a team that really, besides Patrick Laine and a bit of Cole Caulfield, there's not somebody that is automatic on the power play in the goal scoring department. That could be maybe something they look for when it comes to the prospect they draft, especially in the first. And really the last 2 needs I can see for Montreal is potentially a bottom 6 forward and a 4th line center. We're talking 4th line players. This is mostly the type of roles that they'll want to fill in the second round of this year's draft. I think they could still work on that 4th line going forward. There's a lot of players that are kind of up in the air whether they'll actually have a future in Montreal. Bringing more reinforcements there will give them even more competition. I think that'll be good for everybody. So let's talk about those 16th and 17th overall picks, the players who I see as the most likely to be around this range for the Habs. In terms of the 5 guys that I think are the best fits around this range and guys that I see as pretty likely to be around it, let's start out with, in my opinion, maybe the most likely Habs pick in this year's draft, in Justin Carbonneau, who at 16 or 17, I think would be a pretty slam dunk pick to make if you're the Habs. In terms of the team needs that I proposed, he checks 2 of those boxes, being an absolute power play sniper, being somebody as well who I think will be a very serviceable middle 6 forward. I think is most likely going to be more of a third line power play quarterback, but that's exactly what I think the Habs could use a little bit more of. He's great on the rush, the speed is solid as well, and he has good physical attributes, even if I want to see him use it a little bit more. But you can see this here in 62 QMJHL games, 46 goals, 89 points, just an absolute beast. He's something that just with the shot and the way he's able to get in front of the net. There's a lot to like there in the goal scoring department, and I think especially for Montreal, that's going to be an important player to get in this year's draft. Again, they don't have anybody that I think projects with real power play, real goal scoring upside that hasn't really entered the team yet, but Carbonneau brings that type of element, and again, if Patrick Laine especially isn't going to be a long-term piece, well, Justin Carbonneau could fill that role pretty easily. And I think bring a little bit more intensity than Patrick Laine does, or at least that's the hope. I still have some concerns over the two-way game, and the physicality, again, I think is something I want to see him use more and more of, but there's a lot of good traits to build on there, and a lot of potential that I think Marty St. Louis could capture here. Speaking of potential, the second option I think is also a very realistic pick for them is Logan Hensler, and I could see a situation where it's Carbonneau at 16, Hensler at 17, and that's your first round. And I think, honestly, that'd be a pretty good one. I'm a big fan of Logan Hensler, but of course, the Montreal Canadiens have not been afraid to draft Badgers in the past. Cole Caulfield, of course, is a pretty big one recently, and he worked out pretty okay for them. I think in Hensler's case, though, he also checks that middle pair / bottom pair right shot D, and is somebody that I think could be really interesting. He's kind of a blend of the Reinbacher and Hudson molds, where he can kind of do both, but I think for him, finding out that identity is going to be a big part of his game going forward. The confidence has been a little bit of an issue, but in the second half, we started to see it more and more, the puck-moving ability. He's somebody that can go end-to-end with his skating, with the confidence. When he is at his best, he can be a really good defenseman, I think, in the NHL, that can eat up minutes, and especially with transition play, be a very effective defenseman. Somebody that skates well as well, and especially against pressure, has his good moments, but I want to see more maturity. I want to see better pace with his decision-making, but I think in Montreal, given the patience that they could have, I think Montreal will be a great destination for him. Another player that I think is pretty realistically available in the Montreal picks in the middle teens is Malcolm Spence. And he's another one, kind of like Justin Carbonneau, that I've seen as a fit for Montreal really throughout the course of this season, especially in the early mock drafts was one of my most consistent picks, Spence to Montreal. But it just makes a lot of sense to me personally. He's something that especially would be a perfect left wing on that third line, bringing good size, good defensive ability, and just overall a very sound game. I don't think he's extremely talented or anything when it comes to the deking or the puck skill ability, but he just knows where to be to create chaos. He's very physical. He's very involved in the play and in transition. I think he's a nice playmaker as well. So there's some things to go off of there. I think especially at the 17th pick, for example, that would be right around the range where I would be most comfortable taking him. I don't think he's going to be revolutionary for you, but Montreal already has their game-breaking talents on the roster. Spence is just a good complementary piece that, especially in the bottom six, I think would just eat the right minutes and get the job done. And I think for Montreal especially, that's something they could really, really crave in this draft. Spence is all over the place, though, I feel like, when it comes to his value, because there are some boards out there having him inside the top 10, and I can see a situation where, because of his maturity, he gets up there. But I think we are starting to see a little bit of a slide in the standings. I mean, he was outside the top 16 for Bob McKenzie's recent list, which I think is going to be really fascinating there. But I think Spence around this range makes sense for Montreal. I think he'd be a great fit there. Now, at number 4, we're going to go on to the players I think are a little bit less likely, and starting out, we're going to go to a player that I don't know is going to be available in Montreal, but if he is, I think would be a slam dunk pick, and that would be Ratty Murka. Now, he's another player that I think is also all over the place when it comes to value. Personally, I have him well inside my top 10. He's more in the 12 range when it comes to Bob McKenzie's recent lists, which, if that does still hold true, I mean, this is a player that could be all over the place when it's all said and done. I don't think for a player as mobile as he is, with the size and the right shot ability that he has, staying at the spot that Montreal is at, I don't know how likely that is. But again, we're talking about Montreal fits, and even if there is a chance, he to me would be a perfect Montreal Canadian. If you're looking for a bottom pair guy, especially below the Reinbacher and the Hudsons of the world, I mean, Murka is just so perfect. I mean, he is exactly what Montreal could use as a bottom pair, physical, sound defenseman. The mobility is all there. And again, pretty similar, I would say, to a David Reinbacher, maybe with bigger characteristics, but I think it would be a pretty good fit. And especially in a more defensive role, I think would fit just fine. I mean, Ratty Murka, I think, would be a pretty good middle pair D if it does come to that. If Reinbacher is your top pair defenseman on that side, I think he could be pretty good in that spot as well. But if he's bottom pair, I mean, that'd work as well. One of the younger prospects as well for this draft, and for how refined he is already, I think that brings a lot of interest for Montreal. One player as well that I'm not sure if he's going to be available for Montreal, but even if he is, I'm not sure about the interest, is Lachlan Lefebvre. Now, this was a player that I previously mocked to Montreal, and I think would be pretty interesting as a potential middle six left wing going forward, potentially a centerman, but of course, big size, similar to Justin Carbonneau, though, where I don't know how effective he is in actually using it. He's a little bit inconsistent in that regard. He's something something that I think is sliding a little bit just because some of the defensive issues, him just kind of being more of a deking first forward, more of a rush forward, and somebody that you want to see more involvement in the play. It sometimes wants you leaving a little bit more. But I think in Lakovich's case, the skill set, especially on the rush, is exceptional. He's somebody that sees the ice well offensively, and especially can get to the net well as, on top of that. So I think for Montreal, it could be a really interesting project, but I think project is the key word here because I think he is multiple years away at the least. Now let's move on to those second round picks and what Montreal could be targeting in the later rounds here, because I think it is pretty interesting. Obviously, we have no idea who Montreal will draft in the first couple of picks, so that will determine who they ultimately draft in the second round. But in terms of the options that could fit some of these roles, I think in the second, there's a lot of potential here for Montreal. So if they were to trade one or both of their first round picks, I don't think that's the end of the world, because I think there's a lot of players in this range that also check the boxes we previously mentioned, especially on the wing side. If you're looking for third line wingers, I think there's a lot to look for in the second round. A player like Bill Zonin, I think, is especially one that could be available at the 41st range, probably a bit low for him, but I think he's somebody that could easily be in the late 20s, 30s, and of course the early 40s, where the Montreal Canadiens have their 41st overall pick. But I think Bill Zonin would be perfect. I mean, he's somebody that I have some concerns with the skating ability and how he projects as an offensive player, but I love the smarts that he has. He's such a leader already. He's such a mature player, and I just like the balance in his game. He always is going to be putting in the effort, and even though, again, I have some concerns about the upside, I think it could be a very effective bottom sixer. Same thing really goes for Shane Van Saghe, honestly. A pretty similar player, though in Van Saghe's case, it's all physicality all the time. Banging and crashing, trying to create havoc. He's somebody that is an absolute machine on the forecheck. Also has his fair share of skating inconsistencies, but I think in Van Saghe's case, he's a little bit more projectable to me with the style he plays and the simplicity that he brings along with it. And, I mean, if you're looking for especially a fourth-line player, Van Saghe, I think, is one of the most projectable players of this draft. Outside of that, I could also see a player like Jacob Ihs-Wozniak being around at this range, though I think with a solid U18 World Juniors, I think he's bumped himself up a little bit more towards the late first round range for me personally, and depending on the team, also could be in the early 20s. I think in Ihs-Wozniak's case, though, similar to Justin Carbonneau, I think will be a really good power play addition, though I think is more of a project. He's somebody that, though, I think has really improved in the second half in terms of applying his physicality, using his body, and also bringing back more of a defensive game to himself. But I think at the very least, you're going to get a really good power play sniper, somebody that, especially on the playmaking side, brings some good talent there too, and can stretch the play together. So I'm going to be curious to see where he ends up going, but if it's 41st to Montreal, I think it'd be a pretty good fit. Another name that I could see around this range, though I think might go still a bit higher, is Henry Brustovitz, who is, of course, the brother of Hunter, though I would say quite a bit different. Hunter was all offense all the time. Henry's a little bit more of a physical defenseman, and of course, as a right shot D, might end up checking that box. I don't know if he's going to be a middle pair defenseman. I think at best, you're looking at a more physical, decent, all-around bottom pair defenseman, but something I think can eat minutes. The goal scoring is decent. I think the passing ability, especially in transition, has made a lot of progress as well. So I don't think he's a bad player whatsoever, but I think as a second rounder especially would be fairly fitting, and right now 43rd in the consolidated ranking, right around the Montreal Canadiens might be picking in that second round. And last but not least, I would say in this range, somebody that could go all over the place when it comes to draft day, let's go to Philip Ekberg, who, again, another left wing, and is somebody that was also having an all over the place season in the OHL, barely got any minutes for Ottawa this season, and considering that, I think put up some pretty good numbers, 45 points in 53 games, but was explosive at this year's U18s, was almost up there with James Hagen's record. Unbelievable production, 10 goals, 8 assists, 18 points in 7 games, all over the ice, all over pretty much every single goal that Sweden scored. It felt like Ekberg was there, sniping, creating, putting up amazing stretch passes. He was just doing it all offensively, and he's somebody that I think could potentially sneak his way into the early to the late first, but I think is most likely going to be a day 2 draft pick. Somebody though, I think for a team like Montreal, if you're looking for a project, if you can add a little bit more muscle, get a little more consistent, there is something to potentially tap into here. But now for that last pick at 49th overall in the second, there's a few other options I think could be really interesting around this range. First one I want to talk about is William Horkoff, who maybe could go a little bit higher, more towards the early second, but I think was kind of so-so at the U18 World Juniors, which I think will lower his stock just a little bit. But as a natural centerman, he's somebody that was a big body, didn't really get up to the greatest start in the NTDP, but then transitioned over to the University of Michigan and actually looked pretty great there. At the U18s, I think he showed what he can do best still when it comes to physicality, the knack for the net. He's just a very simple player, I would say, and somebody that progresses the play well, is a good power forward, knows what he is, and puts himself out there. I don't think he's going to be an exceptional player, but as a fourth line center, potentially, I think he could be all right. I do think the Habs are okay for centermen, but in the second round, especially if they're already taking a wing, a defenseman, another wing, maybe they go for a center at this type of position and try to really shore up that fourth line center, especially give Owen Beck some competition, for example. Maybe we see that. Another player I could see on the American side is Christian Epperson, somebody that was Michael Misa's line mate a lot throughout this season and definitely did benefit from it. You can see 58 games, 27 goals, 80 points, but was still a solid player by himself. I think he's somebody that is just really good in transition, a really good translatable forward. Not a lot to his game, but again, is just a good complementary piece, especially for a better centerman, especially for a player like Michael Hage. I think especially those two and how good they both are in the rush could be a really unique pair. Keeping going though, potentially as a right D option, you got Luca Renavoyovich, who I would say especially after the first round, the right D options do start to get a little bit shored up. Renavoyovich, I think, is one of the more likely guys to be in that second round though, and even though the size is a big issue to me, he skates well. I think he is pretty smart in his own end, and I don't think there's somebody that is going to be making a ton of mistakes defensively. But again, the size has been a bit of an issue, but I thought he was solid at the U18 World Juniors, so actually I thought was pretty decent as well at the U20s. He's going to BC next year, is definitely a major project, but again, for Montreal, I think it's the second round. You're playing with house money at this point. You've already drafted so much. Going for a project like Radavoyevich, I wouldn't mind it. And then on to the last two forwards I want to mention for this spot. First, I got Theo Stoelius, who is somebody that has really risen for me in this second half. One of the younger pieces in this draft, being a July birth date, but huge boy, 6'3", 183 pounds, mostly ranked in the third round, but I think that will likely be a second rounder when it's all said and done. Great at the U18s, and I've had a great last bit of the season at the U-Junior 20 level. Somebody that is just so good with his size, knows how to use it, knows how to apply himself. Reminds me, and he's not as big, but reminds me a little bit of the Elmer Soderblom and just how much he was just a menace out there when he needed to be. I don't know for Stoelius if he's going to be better than a Soderblom, if he's going to be worse, if he's going to be around that range, but I could see a similar player projected to the next level. And then on to the last player I want to talk about here today, somebody that I have really enjoyed watching recently in the USHL, and somebody that I don't think is going to be getting a ton of attention, but I think maybe should, and that is Mason West. Now, you're not going to be hearing a ton about him, ranked right now, I think, in the fourth round in the consolidated ranking, but the highest is elite prospects at 49. He, to me, is quickly becoming an early second rounder for me, though. Also another young prospect in this draft, an August birth date, but you see 6'6", 207 pounds, mostly played in high school this year for Minnesota, but you can see played 10 games for Fargo in the regular season. I watched a couple of those games, and I thought he was absolutely brilliant. I mean, even though there is some rawness, I would say, to his game, there's a lot to work on. The biggest thing about West to me, though, is the vision and the creativity, and especially the passing ability on the rush. He is somebody that is just so good, especially along the boards, winning board battles, making those hard plays happen. He's a 6'6" player, but he does play it like it out there. He knows the body that he's capable of using, and I think he really applies it well along the ice. I do think there is a little bit of an issue again in the rawness and some of the skating ability, but I think he's somebody that the Habs, they've drafted bigger forwards, bigger projects like this in the past, and I think around 49, I mean, that's pretty respectable for the talent level that we're working with here. But those are my draft targets for this year's Montreal Canadiens draft class. A lot of guys to talk about, and a lot of guys we went through, so hopefully you guys did enjoy. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy the Habs draft content, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe and notification bell for more videos just like this. Comment down below, what do you think about the Habs draft coming up? Who do you think are the most realistic players from the draft? And who do you want to see the Habs get in this 2025 draft? Let me know all your thoughts down below. Of course, share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online and click on this card for all my 2025 draft content right in one playlist. I will see you guys in the next one. Make sure you have a fantastic hockey day, and goodbye.